Okay, we're going to do some reciprocal teaching on Dulce et Decorum Est. As the teacher, I am going to ask the first question in reciprocal teaching, which is a prediction question. What are we going to learn next, group? What happens next in this text? Well, I, as the summariser, would say that I don't really have much of a clue because the title just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not even written in English. As the questioner, I would also have to ask the question, what does that title actually mean? It looks like it's written in a foreign language, doesn't it? As the motivator, I would say we need not to be put off by this title just because it's in a foreign language. We've got to make the assumption that the rest of the poem is going to be in English, don't we? Let's motivate ourselves, guys. As the assessor, I would say that we would have to assess our knowledge as not very great on that, although I happen to know a little bit about that because I have done history, and we did this in history, don't you remember, on the First World War. Dulce et Decorum Est means it is sweet and beautiful in Latin, and the other phrase is pro patria mori, sweet and beautiful to die for one's country. I happen to know that. That is very interesting, says the Learning to Learn chief. And as Learning to Learn chief, I'd say, what have we learnt from that? We've learnt that we can learn from each other, can't we? And we've learned that if we make connections between the topics, then we learn more. As motivator, I have to say, well done, guys. We made a good start. We now, as the six of us working together, have an idea of what this poem might be about. Sweet and beautiful to die for one's country. So, in other words, teacher says we've got an idea of what the poem might be about, a kind of war poem saying that it's going to be really great to die for your country, isn't it? Yeah, kind of weird thing. Anyway, let's read the poem. As teacher, I'm going to have to ask you guys to do a bit of reading. Teacher, I'm going to ask, I think, the motivator to read the first section. Motivator, off you go. Thank you very much. I really like reading. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot, all went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Okay, as teacher, I'm going to stop us there because we've read the first bit of the poem. Do you think we need to read the rest of the poem? Questioner, what do you think? Well, I'm going to ask the question back to you guys. Do you actually think we need to read the rest? Well, says the assessor, I think if we were to assess our knowledge of this first bit, then that would help us. I'm going to ask the Learning to Learn chief, what do you actually understand from this first bit? Well, to be honest, says Learning to Learn chief, I don't actually have much of an idea. I get the feeling that it's sort of showing that war is not very nice. So men march to sleep is a line that I definitely can understand, and it feels like that. So that means that the men are really tired, aren't they? They're virtually asleep. Come on, guys, says motivator. Let's look at this line by line. Okay, says summariser. Let's look at the first two lines. I'll try and summarise the first two lines. I'll read them again. bent double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like cats. Okay, so if I was to summarise what bent double meant, I would say, in my own words, it would say like you're sort of leaning over, aren't you? Like you're going to be sick. You bend over doubly, or really a great deal if you're going to be sick. Like old beggars under sacks. So that's like these soldiers are like old beggars. They're kind of people who are very, very poor, and they're under sacks, so they've got sacks on their heads, haven't they? I imagine, I can see that in my mind. That's the next. Knock-kneed. Okay, so that is where your knees are knocking together, isn't it? So they're looking like they're going to be sick. They've got sacks over their heads, I imagine. They're like beggars, and they're coughing like hags. They're coughing like old women, coughing. So we've got a kind of picture there, haven't we? Questioner asks, but what does the next line mean? We cursed through sludge. Teacher says, let's ask the assessor to say that, because you haven't said much recently. Curse through sludge. So to curse means to swear. So curse, and they're walking through sludge, like real horrible mud. Motivator says, well done, assessor. I'm going to have a go at the next line. Till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. So I'm not sure what a flare means. Can I ask the teacher what you think a flare means? The teacher says, I don't really know what a flare is. Does anyone else know? Well, let's read the whole passage, says the summariser, to get a sense. Till on the haunting flares we turned our back, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. So, learning to learn, Chief. Have you got any ideas on this? Well, my guess is a flare, isn't it? It's like you set them off at sea, don't you, as a sort of sign that you're in trouble. So it's like a kind of firework. It feels like there's kind of they're turning their backs on all of these kind of fireworks. Maybe it's the fireworks from the bombs going off, and then they're towards our distant rest began to sludge. Assessor, can you help us out here? Yeah, if we were to assess our knowledge here, I think we could assess ourselves as, sort of having understanding of most of those words in that line. So towards our distant rest began to trudge. We are going towards the place where they're going to sleep, but where they're going to sleep is distant. It's a long way away. Very well done, says the motivator. I think we're doing great. Questioner says, aren't we going a bit slowly? Well, I think it's worth taking our time, says the teacher, because we get to know the poem well. Let's read the next few lines and see how we get on. Questioner says, teacher, you're not actually really saying very much here, are you? I mean, you're not telling us what the poem means. Isn't that your job? Teacher says, actually, it is not my job. My job is to try and get you guys to work out what the poem is and help out where I can. I'm not going to give a great long lecture on this. Let's read the next few lines. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind. Oh, says motivator, I know what this means. So they've lost their boots, they've lost their shoes, and they're limping because they're really injured. They're bloodshot. Now, not quite sure what shod means, but I'm guessing that they're covered in blood, aren't they? All went lame. Well, I know what that means. They can't walk properly, and they're blind. They can't see anything. Assessor says, yes, I would assess your knowledge is very strong now. I'm going to do the next bit. Drunk with fatigue. Ooh, fatigue. If I was to assess my knowledge of the word fatigue, I would say I don't really have much of a clue. Can anyone help me? Questioner says, well, what things What questions can we ask to help us understand it? Drunk with fatigue. Let's read the whole few lines. Drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. So they're so drunk with something that they're deaf to all the shells dropping behind them. They can't hear all of the shells. Assessor says, is a shell like a seashell? And Learning to Learn Chief says, come on, don't be stupid. It's not going to be a seashell. They're not beside the seaside. Motivator says, no, Learning to Learn Chief, don't talk to us like that. Don't call us stupid. We're just trying. We've got to get an atmosphere in this group where we all work together, haven't we? Okay, calling ourselves stupid is not a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to say that gas shells, I would guess it's like the shell of a gas bomb, so like a metal thing, so we've got them, they can't hear all of the kind of shells of gas going off, and I would guess that drunk with fatigue might mean tiredness, because they're so tired they can't actually hear what's going on, and that relates to a previous line, doesn't it? Men march to sleep. So, summariser says, come on, let's summarise this first bit of the poem. And if I was to summarise it, we've got a picture of soldiers in a battlefield. They're really tired. They've lost their shoes. They've all gone blind. They're so tired they can't even hear the gas shells going off. And they're cursing, and it's really weird because it doesn't feel like it's like sweet and beautiful to die for your country like this. Teacher says, okay guys, are you beginning to get an idea of how to do reciprocal teaching? Everyone's supposed to get involved. Everyone's supposed to sort of say something related to their role. You've got a series of questions on your sheets. We haven't always stuck to those particular questions, and the ones that bold are the ones that role really needs to ask, but all of us chip in where we can. Okay, well done so far. Now it is your turn to do the next two sections of the poem.